My name is Maru. I'm a developer advocate working on Instant Apps, and we're here today to do an Android Instant Apps best practices fireside chat. It's lots of words. As you know, we announced Instant Apps last year at Google I/O to lots of developer excitement, and we're so happy that we're able to open it today to all developers. And in the process of getting here, we worked with a large group of developers to get all those nice apps that you saw on the previous sessions. Some part of that group is here sitting with me today. So we have our panel from Castbox, Twitter, Vimeo, Deliveroo, and Zillow. Woohoo! Okay. So let's go start with some intros. First, Alan. Alan is a product manager for Castbox, and he loves listening to podcasts. He works on trying to optimize the listening experience on podcasts for his users. Alan, tell me, which ones are your favorite podcasts?
Serial, This American Life, and especially 99% Invisible, because it's made right here in Oakland, California.
Oh, nice, Oakland. Anyone from Oakland here? Woohoo! OK, next we have Leanne from Twitter. And yay! Leanne is a senior staff software engineer for Twitter, and she works on Periscope. She was a tech lead for the Fabric team as well, and she worked on the mobile Twitter app. She likes to hike, she likes arts and crafts, and she also likes to work in the garden. Leanne, let's see. Any favorite spots that you like to hike in?
Yeah, so I have a spot down on the peninsula called Hidden Villa, and it has a lot of beautiful trails. My favorite runs alongside this creek. It's got lots of shade and gently sloping trails, so it's a perfect hike for me and my son, who's 4.
Oh, good. Cool. I love Hidden Villa. It's nice. Next, we have Kyle. Kyle from Vimeo. Kyle, woohoo! Kyle came here from New York City, and he is the Android lead for the Vimeo app. He worked both in the creation of the mobile and the TV apps, which are both great. And he loves to travel. And he told me this story that I think he should share with you guys from his last trip.
Yeah, actually, my last trip, I got to bungee jump off of a bridge in Zimbabwe, which was a ton of fun.
How was that?
A blast, exhilarating, and it was right over a river, so kind of horrifying.
Scary.
Yeah.
Great. Now we go to Anna. Anna is from Deliveroo. She came from London. Long way here. Thank you, Anna. Anna works on the consumer application for Deliveroo. She's an Android engineer, and she loves sweets. So she has a funny story about her order history in Deliveroo.
Yes, so if you look at my order history, you will see that I mainly order sweets, but I also have a prawn. Yes, I ordered 1 prawn because I was showing to my sister what I was working on, and I just told her, no matter what you do, don't press this button. And as I was pointing to that button, I just touched it, and I placed an order.
Someone got free prawns. That was probably a surprise. Now we go to I know your name. Lucas. Lucas from Zillow. Lucas is a software engineer in the Zillow team, and he works on their mobile app. He's been at Zillow for 3 years. And Lucas likes to play games and also to watch random documentaries on Netflix and YouTube. Tell me one, just one random documentary.
So one documentary I watched recently on YouTube was about harpy eagle. It's one of the largest eagles in the world, and it's in South America. And it's really fun to be able to follow around a baby harpy eagle for 4 months in a 1-hour video. So that was a lot of fun.
Good. OK, so what we were trying to do here is that you guys get to know us a little bit before we start. And now we're going to go through some questions. I'm going to ask you serious questions now about the work that this panel did on Instant Apps. Most of it is going to be very technical. Some of it's going to be product questions as well. And after that, we're going to open the floor for Q&A. So we're going to have 2 mics that you can come up and ask questions. And that will be for the last 15 minutes. So don't run off when we're done, OK? So we're going to start with the questions. First is the why. So that's the first question we get, right? Why would you do this? So why why would you invest your resources and time in building this? So Alan, what made you decide to build an instant app for Castbox?
So we took a risk to try Instant App out because we believe Instant App is useful for people who don't currently use Castbox to have a first impression with our platform. For example, if you listen to an episode on This American Life or Planet Money and using Castbox and blew your mind, and you can't wait to share it with, say, your friend Meryl, who happens not have the app installed. So you click the share button, send over the link. With Instant App, Meryl can click the link, and Castbox will load right away and start playing the episode that you think Carol would like. We we get some traffic from search engine as well. If you search for episodes that you want to listen and click the link from the search results page, that triggers the Instant App experience as well. We actually have a website with the full functionality and with over 500,000 podcast channels. We use the website for internal testing, operations team to validate traffic or take down some bad traffic. It's already mobile optimized. So initially, we used the WebView wrapper to try Instant App out.
So that brings a good topic. Should you take a website and put a WebView wrapper around it and build an instant app? When we were working with Castbox, we gave them a recommendation to move away from that and go a full native experience. And I think we gave them this feedback on a Friday afternoon. And then they said, sure, we'll have it ready by Monday. And I was like, nah. But tell us a little bit about what you guys did for that.
Right. So if we take a step back, first of all, we could see the difference. So obviously, WebView is slower. The scrolling is less smooth. We care about our user experience. So we actually don't want our users to spend too much time on our user interface, per se. We actually want them to come in and listen to the episode they like. So internally, we track two metrics. One is total listening time, which is about 1 to 2 hours per user per day, typically. Two, the time users spend on using the user interface itself, which we try to minimize to some extent. So that's the main reason we wanted to move from WebView experience to the full native experience. So over the holiday weekend, the engineering team did the refactoring and put in the native code, did testing, and got a lot of useful feedback from Adam from the operations team, which is always responsive and helpful. We added a few features, such as we added a dialog to pop up the install to install the regular app. For instance, if you listen to an episode and you want to subscribe, and the dialog will pop up, say that you can subscribe to the channel by downloading the regular app, because we haven't built the full user profile system yet. We haven't built the full features yet. The team initially thought it would be too much work, but it turns out to be easy, because the app is already modularized. That speed up the development process. We use Dagger 2 framework as dependency injection to build the UI. We use the EXO player to handle the playback. These two libraries, together with many other libraries, are well supported by the Instant App SDK. So that made the development process fast and straightforward. As we move on to iterate the Instant App, we plan to add other features as well, such as in-app billing for users who want to share premium content, say, to someone who doesn't have the regular app installed. So that person can use Instant App and in-app billing to purchase that content, for example. So last but not least, the journey from WebView to full native Instant App cannot be completed by our hardworking engineering team, some of them in the audience. Go team. And the fantastic support by the DevRel team and BD team of Google. So I want to say a big thank you.
Thank
and
you.
we're really excited about Instant App, and as we add more features in the future to make the experience even better for our users.
Awesome. Thank you. Yay, Alan. Now, the next question we get is, how long? How long does this take? Is this really difficult, or is it easy? He said it was easy. Do you believe him? So now, Lian, this is your question. This process takes, from the partners that we worked with, we saw that it could take as little as 3 days to 6 weeks. So we're saying in average, we think it can take from 4 to 6 weeks. It really depends on how modularized your app is and where you are. How long did it take you to build the Periscope Instant App, and where were the easiest or hardest things you did?
For Periscope, I'd say it took us about 3 weeks total over a course of several months to build a production-ready instant app. Periscope was in the first wave of partners, and we started development back in September. Being in the first wave of instant apps meant we were getting very early versions of the SDK, and we get these drops every week. Whenever we got it, we would test it, build it, see what issues there were, and verify bug fixes. So it was a really iterative process between Google and us, a lot of rinse and repeats. But by the end of October, we had a fully functional instant app, to the point that it was even demoed at the Google Playtime event in SF in November. And that was really exciting for us to see, because it was just validation of all the work that we were putting into the Instant App and the progress we were making. In terms of easiest, I'd say there were 2 reasons why I felt like the Periscope Instant App development was relatively straightforward. The first was the Periscope app at that time was already modularized. So in March of last year, we had spent a lot of time pulling out core playback functionality from the app into a library. And what we were doing with this library was bringing this library into the Twitter for Android app, because we wanted to have a native viewing experience within the Twitter for Android app. So what that meant was we had a head start here. When we started the Instant Apps project, we didn't have to focus on modularizing our app. We could hit the ground running and really focus on just integrating with the Instant Apps SDK. The second reason I felt like the whole process was enjoyable for us was we just had a great working relationship with Google, and this was super important because we were in that first wave of Instant Apps development. There was very little documentation. We were learning as we were going, both sides. And our developer advocate, Arun, really did a great job partnering with us to make sure we were set up for success. So we were getting quick turnaround times on bug issues, status updates on issues and how they were tracking. Google also vetted all the third-party libraries that we were using, so we didn't have to worry about compatibility issues. They also gave us tips on what we can do to reduce our APK size, and they shared a lot of those tips at another I/O session today. And we got a lot of testing support. Again, being in the first wave, we had access or limited access to devices, so we couldn't do a lot of testing in-house. And we were also under NDA, so not a lot of people knew what we were doing. So those, I would say, made it easy for us. In terms of what was hardest, I say the hardest thing for Periscope was just being aware of the subtle differences between a regular app and an instant app. So instant apps run in this sandboxed environment, and what that means is there's not a one-to-one mapping of the API behavior between the regular app and the instant app. And we saw this right away when we were looking at how Periscope parts were being rendered. Periscope parts are like a core experience in the Periscope community. They're what viewers use to show their support and appreciation for what the broadcaster is showing. So getting this experience right, the Periscope parts, was really critical for us. It needed to be exactly the same between the instant app and the regular app. And the fix for this was actually easy. What we were doing was we were calling create bitmap, and we were using this 3-parameter version to create this bitmap. It took in the with the height and the bitmap configuration. But in the Instant App world, you need to give it a little bit more information. So the fix here was we had to switch to using a 4-parameter version, and that 4th parameter was one that took in the display metrics. And that gave us the density compatibility mode in order to render those bitmaps correctly in the Instant App world. So the key takeaway here is just to really take a lot of time to test your app thoroughly, because there may be a subtle difference in how the API behaves in Instant Apps, because they are running in this sandbox environment. They have restrictions and platform limitations in order to make it secure for these Instant Apps to run on the device. And Google has come a long way since we started. Again, we were first wave, and the tooling and the support is really there. There's a lot of lint support in there that will help developers with this.
Yep. Thank you. So we move now to Kyle. We're going to talk about refactoring. Refactoring is, or can be, the scariest thing when you read the docs and you think, am I going to be able to do that? So we wanted to talk about what it means to refactor, what are recommendations that Kyle can give the audience in terms of how to make this process easier. So Kyle, would you give the audience some recommendations on how refactor the app, but also how to reduce the APK size?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Vimeo app itself, the full app actually started at 16 megabytes. And to get it down to an instant app, you need to have each feature be 4 megabytes. So for us, we were going to build a player instant app that we needed to chop down a lot of megabytes on. So with that, we found a lot of different tools we could use and different things we could do to accommodate that and get there as fast as possible. We kind of started with the low-hanging fruit of the easy things. So of that, you have a tool that's built actually right into Android Studio, which is for removing unused resources. So you actually just go into Refactor on Android Studio, remove unused resources, and that'll kill things like layout files that aren't being referenced anymore, and then because of that, it'll remove any PNGs that aren't being used anymore. So that's a really good place to start. That's kind of where we began. The next piece is actually a little bit meatier and more technical, and I guess that advice is basically trying to look and draw out a dependency tree for whatever feature you're trying to turn into an instant app. So for what that would end up looking like is basically taking the activity or fragment and then look at all the imports at the top of the file and then see what those imports, what those point to and what their dependencies are. And it actually helps just to draw this out, just so you can see exactly what classes this feature will depend on. So in our case, we actually started by, we thought all along that we had been modularizing our code, making it super easy to just pull out. All of our player activity was inside of our player package. So we started out by just trying to cut that and paste it into a module. So in doing so, we were like, oh, hopefully it's just going to work. But sure enough, it ended up having a whole bunch of those red squiggly lines on all of our import statements, which was, of course, daunting. But from there, we kind of started figuring out, well, what are the things that we can cut down on? What are the dependencies we can remove from our player activity? So what that ended up looking like, I guess a concrete example we ran into was we use Fresco for our image caching, which, if you're unfamiliar, is actually a pretty large library. It's great because it's super performant, but it's around 2 megabytes, which in the world of instant apps is absolutely massive. It's half of your requirement for a feature. So we basically had to find a way to pull out Fresco and then swap in some other form of image caching. So what that ended up looking like was we created this interface which handles all of our image caching for us, which you then could basically stub in and inject which different implementation you'd like to use. So the way that we used, so basically for our full app, we use Fresco because we like the performance. But then for the instant app, we use Picasso, which is only a couple hundred kilobytes, which of course we still get image caching. It might not be as fast, but it still works. So that was a big piece for us. The last thing is something we actually, I think, kind of did relatively well, which was relying pretty heavily on composition. So for the player activity, we, of course, have this player component that we rely very heavily on for all of our playback. Now, our player has to be able to accommodate 360 video playback. It has to be able to do Chromecasting. We have offline playback of encrypted files so you can download to watch later. And because of that, we knew we had to build our player in such a way that we could easily add in these pieces or inject them in. So because we have the same code base, really, for both our mobile apps and our TV Android app, we started this process because we didn't need things like that. It ended up benefiting us in the long run using dependency injection at that level, because then for our instant app, we actually don't need to have 360. We don't need Chromecast. We don't need offline playback because it's not currently supported by instant apps. So it was actually really easy just to remove these larger dependencies. So with 360, you get things like the Cardboard SDK, which is pretty large. Or with Chromecast, you have Play Services, which is also pretty large. Offline playback had a whole bunch of encryptor files. So we basically were able to remove those right off the bat, and that saved us a ton of space. So I guess basically just to sum up all that stuff, it's really a matter of just looking at your dependencies, seeing exactly what depends on what are things that are absolutely necessary, and if there's something that's relatively large, think about wrapping it in an interface. Try to compose your different pieces. With that interface, you can either potentially omit it entirely or swap it for something smaller like we did with Fresco. And then also, for people that are going to be building new features going forward, something that we've started doing and has helped us a ton is actually just when you build a new feature into your app, build it as a module. Build it as its own totally as a library module that your main app depends on. And then keep an eye on that build.gradle file, because that'll tell you exactly all the things that are consuming all the space. And those are the things that are going to get you in the end. And of course, if anyone has any questions about our particular implementation, you can feel free to ask me after.
Thank you.
Of course.
Where's the team? So I think that's a good segue into the next question. Doing some of this work that you do for your instant app may result in benefits for your installed app or your installable app. So that's like a free win that you're getting when you're doing this work. So Anna, was there any benefit or did the work that you did on your instant app have any benefits on your installable app?
Yes, it had. So when we started to work on our instant app, we knew that we are going to change the structure of our project. This because with instant apps, you give users the opportunity to access a feature from your application, and this means it has to be in a separated module. So this was one of the biggest challenges that we faced, because we didn't have modules, and we brainstormed a lot in order to find a way to split our project in meaningful units that could be used in both installed app and the instant app, because we took this approach as we didn't want to have the feeling in the future that we are going to maintain two different applications. So because it was such a big change, we decided to do it gradually, and as we release so often, we didn't want to have any impact on our customers. So now, having more modules, it increased our build time. But in the end, we learned so much during this process. We have a better project structure. And I think with the new tools that were announced today, we are going to see some improvements. Some other improvements that we did in our application were to reduce the size of the APK and the number of methods. And how we did it, we started by looking our program files just to make sure we hadn't missed anything. And then we looked at the libraries that we used, and we decided to remove some of them. For others, we looked for a lighter version, and we replaced them. And then we actually noticed something interesting. So while we are investigating why our resources are so big, we found out that some libraries had lots of strings that were localized in so many languages that we didn't use in our application. So we changed the Gradle script so that we can include only the 7 languages that we support. And this also decreased the size of our APK. So after all these changes, we noticed a decrease in our APK size by about 20%. And other changes that we did were not necessarily related to refactoring, but they were related to the fact that we were building an instant app. So one example was adding smart lock for passwords. This was recommended to have in the instant app, and it was very easy to integrate. And we felt that it was a very good feature, and we decided to have it in our installed app as well, as it simplified the sign-in experience for our customers. And in the end, we have a great team at Deliveroo. They are here in the audience. We are constantly improving our application. And during this program, we learned so many things. We have now a better project structure. We removed some of the libraries. We kept only the ones that were truly helpful for us. And I would say that the fact that we decreased the APK size came as a big bonus.
That's good, 20%.
Yes.
That's awesome. And this is on the install app, not the instant app, so that's good. Also, we hear all the time how much tech debt you have on your apps, and you never have the time, and it's not a priority for the product team to give you time to work on this. But now that if you work on instant apps, and you have that time to work on some of that cleanup and things that you always wanted to do, or maybe didn't, but it's good for your app. Thank you. Now we're going to go to Lucas, and this is our last question before Q&A. So, Lucas, now that you've gone through the process of building an instant app for Zillow, what are some recommendations, or what are the things that you wish you'd known before you started this process?
Yeah, so I think one of the big recommendations I would have is to definitely sit down and read through all the requirements for instant apps. And make sure that everything you think you have implemented, you actually test to make sure you have implemented. So for the longest time, we thought we had app linking implemented correctly in our regular app. The problem was, when we went to test it to make sure that it was working, it didn't. So we had to kind of halt development on our instant app and make sure that we got app linking actually working in our main app. And so, just make sure that you look all that over and for sure test it before you just start working on instant apps. Another thing to keep in mind is that network calls and instant apps all have to be secure network calls. So we had to go through and audit our network library to make sure that everything we had was using secure network calls. And we also had to audit all the third-party libraries we were using. It turns out one of our analytics libraries was using unsecured network calls, and then they were just basically not working at all in instant apps. So go through and make sure that you can either work around those network calls in your instant app, or re-implement those in a secure way. Another big thing that I would recommend is to get very familiar with build tools, like Kyle recommended the APK analyzer. I think probably around 70% of our work was to cut our app size down, and these tools are definitely a lifesaver. Another tool that we ended up using a lot was actual Gradle dependencies, which would print out a whole dependency tree for you, and it will not only show you the libraries that you depend on, but the libraries that those libraries depend on, so you can see all your transitive dependencies. And you can actually, through Gradle, you can exclude some of those transitive dependencies. So we were able to exclude like third-party analytics libraries, and that was able to help cut down the size of our app quite a bit. And then another thing to look at for size-wise is your assets. Make sure you're not using really detailed assets when you can't really tell the difference. I think we ended up just totally removing our 2 most detailed folders of assets. And that ended up helping to get us actually down below 4 megs so that we could actually get an instant app up and running that was working. And the last thing we found out was we had a crasher on startup of our instant app. And one way that we were able to debug it was since instant apps are just a zip file with feature module APKs, you can actually sideload those APKs onto your phone like you would a regular app. And that way, when you start it would start up just like the regular app would, and you wouldn't lose some of these exceptions in the stack trace. And I think the last thing I'd like to say is that it sounds like this might be a difficult thing to do, but trust me, it's worth it. I think it provides a great experience for our audience. That's really what we're all here to do, is provide great experiences for our customers.
Awesome. Thank you. If you're interested, please go g.co/instanaps. We're at the Sandbox, office hours, and you already probably watched all our sessions. So thank you.